Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we just wrapped up talking about the Thursday night football game, which was not a good one in terms of an entertainment standpoint. I'm sure Jets fans everywhere love that game in particular, but ultimately very non-competitive. That being said, I think that this upcoming weekend and some of the Sunday games in particular are going to be much more entertaining and have the potential to answer a lot of questions that we've had up to this point in the NFL based off of what has been a very interesting first couple weeks of the 2024 NFL season. So I want to dive into some of these matchups and talk about really what's at stake for a lot of these biggest games. And I want to start in Minnesota, where they will be hosting the Houston Texans during the 1 o'clock p.m. slate. And the biggest question here is this Sam Darnold thing. Obviously, we're seeing the resurgence of a number of quarterbacks that were counted out over the past couple weeks, and we're trying to find out how sustainable is all of this. And Sam Darnold, obviously, not alone. Again, multiple quarterbacks that are, playing much above expectations up to this point, and I do think that Darnold, especially in that Kevin O'Connell system, where I think that O'Connell gets so underrated in terms of the love that he gets from the casual NFL fan. I think that he is an excellent coach and an excellent offensive scheme person, that he is helping Sam Darnold to have the 5th best passer rating in the NFL up to this point. Now, sure, you can point to that Giants game, say, well, that's really when he did a lot of his heavy lifting, and it's against the Giants defense. Sam Darnold, I think he was good, all things considered, against San Francisco, but we did see a little bit more, at least, of kind of the Darnold that we have known for the longest time in terms of some of the decision-making, the sacks that he took, but he ended up getting the win. And he made the throw, of course, to Justin Jefferson down the field. That was very impressive as well. So how real is this revenge tour for Darnold? He now gets to go up against the Texans, which is a very physical defense. We saw that this past weekend in Chicago. Now, what we also learned from that Sunday night football game between Houston and Chicago was that if DeMeco Ryans doesn't think that you are excellent in terms of facing the pressure, he's going to bring it. It's not necessarily his MO, but if he's not going to trust you to actually burn you downfield, he might bring that pressure a little bit more. Now, the fact that the Vikings also have Justin Jefferson probably builds into that, and I don't know quite how much pressure they're going to bring, but I do think that it's going to be very interesting to see. And Jefferson is expected to play, by the way, at least as of the time recording here. Was dealing with a quad contusion last week, but he seems like he is good to go in that game. And I think it's going to be really interesting for Sam Darnold in this one. And then, just talked about the idea of bringing pressure. One of the biggest winners of the first couple weeks has been Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator. This idea that obviously, the very public downfall, or however you want to phrase it, the relationship that he had with Tua Tagovailoa when he was in Miami was not a good look for him, but ultimately, he is a very high quality coach, and it's more so on the defensive side of the ball. There's still a lot of unknowns in terms of will that actually be able to translate to him being a head coach, because the leadership didn't seem all too great in his first go-around with Miami a few years ago. But even that being said, they still made the playoffs. They were not a bad team under his leadership there. So I think that Flores is somebody who understands that this is a big season for him now that he has these new pieces on the defensive side of the ball in Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard and those types of additions. So that's a game that I definitely think is going to be very interesting to keep an eye on. Of course, Eagles at New Orleans is a huge game. More so than anything, it's just about, we talked about Sam Darnold just now. Derek Carr on the other side, he has been incredible up to this point as the Saints offense has put up over 40 points in each of their first 2 games. Now, can't imagine that that's going to be the expectation for them moving forward, but still, how legitimate is this Saints offense, where I still think that Philadelphia, I've been saying this for weeks now, that is a defense you can move the ball against. So it's not like this is a grade A test of going up against an elite defense, but a lot of playmakers on that Philly defense. And for the Saints, again, you're not going to score 40 points per game, but now that they have all of these, expectations and all of these articles and media people talking about how great Derek Carr has been and just the extent of this New Orleans offense making them a potential contender, can they continue to back that up? Because again, while I don't think that the Eagles are an elite defense, they still have a lot of players. And ultimately, now that the spotlight is on the Saints, week 1, they ended up beating up on the Panthers. Just about everybody seems to be doing that. So, a little bit less to take out of that game. But now against, back-to-back teams that are supposed to be some of the best in the NFC, can you continue to produce? That is the main thing. On the Eagles side of this, it's just about how you respond, and it's definitely on Nick Sirianni. We talked about this last week. Spotlight is going to be on him moving forward here, where I don't know quite how much necessarily, you can give as to what does Sirianni have to prove on a week-to-week basis. It's just about sort of how these games unfold, and will he be able to make the right adaptations and the right calls? We'll have to see there. But obviously a big bounce back spot for the Eagles, and they really need it given their loss on Monday night. Then if you look a little bit into the later slate, Baltimore at Dallas, a very interesting game there. 2 teams that suffered disappointing losses for different reasons. Saints are a better team than the Raiders, but the Cowboys getting blown out by the Saints last week was a huge red flag for them, especially considering the fact that, last year they were such a dominant team while playing at home in Jerry World, and then to get rolled up on like that by the Saints, huge red flag there. On the Ravens side, seemed like they had so many chances to close out that game against the Raiders, weren't able to do so. Their secondary ended up having a pretty tough time overall trying to stop Gardner Minshew. What's it going to look like here against a more competent, no disrespect to Gardner Minshew, but, more of a highly regarded quarterback in the NFL in someone like Dak Prescott. Dak himself also has a lot of pressure surrounding him after what was a largely underwhelming performance in week 2. So both of those teams trying to bounce back from losses. Somebody's got to lose that game. And I think that you're looking at a situation here where Ravens, they'd be falling to 0-3, which still a talented team. I don't want to call it a death sentence if they go 0-3, but that is a huge uphill battle to be able to climb your way back into, winning your division, having home field advantage for the playoffs, so massively important there. Cowboys maybe a little bit more wiggle room, especially because their top competitor in the NFC East is the Eagles, who also have a tough, game ahead of them. So I think that we're going to be diving a little bit more specifically into that game when we do our best bets of the week, but very interesting game there. Can Baltimore's secondary recover after getting carved up by Gardner Minshew? Can the Cowboys find a way to get any semblance of defense back and running? Because week 1, they were playing against the Cleveland Browns, who, their offense obviously has their own dysfunctions. This is easily the biggest test that they have had up to this point in terms of strength of the opposing offense that they are going to face. And then Detroit at Arizona, another very interesting game. I've been very high on the Cardinals entering this season. Last week, they put a thumping on the Los Angeles Rams. This is a team that, they're going to be going toe-to-toe with the Detroit Lions both of them two hard-nosed football teams. Yeah, Kyler has all the magic, of course, when in terms of running around in the pocket, making plays happen there, but I do think that the strength of these teams are both in the run game, and this is a situation where Arizona, if they are going to prove to be a contender of any sorts in the NFC this season, their defense has to step up for them. Not that they didn't last week, but obviously dealing with so many injuries the Rams were last week on both the wide receiver front and on the offensive line. Now they're going to be coming into a game against a hungry Detroit Lions team that I think is going to try and reestablish the run. Let's see whether or not they are able to hold up there. And then the Lions as well, like I mentioned, I think that they're going to try and reestablish the run, but we have seen this offense that was one of the best in the league last season really struggling out of the gates. Can Jared Goff respond and that offense as a whole? What is their approach going to be? Are they going to go back to the, pound the ground running game type of style, or are they going to keep trying to air things out as Ben Johnson is sort of trying to audition to some degree for a head coaching spot next year? And then Sunday night game, the Kansas City Chiefs at the Atlanta Falcons. Very weird game. Chiefs, how are they going to look without Isaiah Pacheco? Pacheco going to be out for, sounds like, at least 6 weeks, if not more. Andy Reid even opened up a little bit on the possibility, and it was a very vague answer, so I don't want to read too much into it. But he talked about the chances that, Pacheco could be out for the entire season. Now, I would be a little bit surprised if that were to happen, but a broken fibula is a huge deal. So how will the Chiefs be able to make up for that ground game? We'll see there. And then for the Falcons, was last week a fluke of the Eagles just sort of throwing up on themselves on that final drive? Or can the Falcons actually be one of these teams that competes week in and week out? We will have to see there, and they will have, a very tough matchup, of course, against the Chiefs, who are going through their own issues, like I just mentioned, with the running game. But that being said, hard to find a power rankings list across the NFL that doesn't have the Chiefs at number one. But we'll get a little bit more into the Monday night games on Monday during the preview. I do think the Jaguars also have a lot to prove there, and the Bills need to see if they can continue to overcome all of the losses on defense. Terrell Bernard now expected to be out for a while. So, a lot going on in that Buffalo side of the ball as well, and that should also be a very interesting game. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section on this week 3 slate, what you are most looking forward to. But we are going to be now next shifting gears and talking about our best bets of the week. We have been off to a great start so far through 2 weeks, but this is a very difficult slate to pick out, so we're going to be giving you the top 5 plays against the spread this upcoming weekend. But before we do so, we are going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.